Explore your thoughts. Learn what you think you already know. We're taking you on a journey to the other side. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Other Side. We're going to wrap up our election coverage for 2024. Don't forget to get out and vote this Saturday, October the 14th. With me in studio today, we have Mr. Jay Callegari. Some of you may have seen him on a previous podcast I had maybe last October or November or something. It's been a little while. Mr. Jay, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lance, and thank you for doing this. These have been some really informative podcasts for the candidates to come on and give their platform and talk about themselves. I've watched all of them, or I listen to them in the car, and they're great.
Yeah, that's what's good about a podcast. And I mentioned this several times. If you listen to something on the radio or something, and if you missed it, you missed it. But a podcast lives on. You can listen to half of it on your way to work, the other half on the way coming back. And I've been getting a lot of positive feedback from the candidates and from incumbents to, and the audience as well. So I think it's a good thing, getting out information, which is why we got you back on the program. You had mentioned it earlier about coming back on the podcast, kind of giving an update, but I had a lot of interviews scheduled. So I said if we can wrap all this up before election, I had to get all the candidates out of the way. Sure. So now the candidates out of the way.
There's been a lot of water under the bridge since we spoke last.
That's right, yeah. And a lot of it will be into response. When I interviewed Bobby Bartlong, like he called you out by name and everything. So being fair, the other side, we like to give all sides of the issues and everything else. So Jay, thanks for coming on. And if you could, so for people who don't know you, who didn't watch the first podcast, if you could just give a brief introduction about yourself.
All right, my name is Jay Callegari, which is of no huge consequence. I'm part of a group called We the People of Avoyelles Parish, and it's a movement in Avoyelles Parish that we're going to be talking about, in the coming minutes here. But I live in Cottonport. I'm a recently elected school board member. I'm not running for anything this year, thank goodness. Although if you listen to Bobby's podcast, you might think I'm running against him, but I'm not. I live here in Avoyelles. I'm a retired game warden. I teach criminal justice and public administration and public policy at two different universities. I teach at LSUA and I teach at Southern New Hampshire University, and I have a small consulting firm.
And you're also a school board member. Did you mention that?
Yes.
Yeah. For what district is
District 5.
District 5 school board. What police jury district do you live in? Cottonport, there's 2 or 3 of them.
I live in the one, I want to say it's 8, where Sam Pierce and John Earls are running.
8. Okay. All right, so we're just going to dive right into it. For those of you who've been watching this podcast, we've talked a lot about the Home Rule Charter, and we interviewed a lot of the police jury candidates. That's kind of where it falls under with the police jury, and kind of move this charter through. So just we'll give a brief summary. I'm going to give a brief summary from my understanding, and then you, because if I understand it a certain way, my audience may understand it the same way, then you can cherry pick and where we're wrong and kind of tighten it up.
And it's a complicated subject, and hopefully between both of us we can articulate to explain to people.
Right. So stop me at any time if it's wrong. So the Home Rule Charter, you're kind of the main proponent. I guess the front runner not front runner, but
I'm a spokesman for a group of people.
Right. So the Home Rule Charter would shift our parish form of government from the police jury system to where we'd have a full-time parish president. So it was proposed to the police jury, and the police jury at that time could have assigned or appointed counsel to come together and write a charter, which would be the rules and the way the new system of government would be performed.
So let's back up a little bit before we get to that.
Okay.
In 1812, 200 and something years ago, when after President Jefferson had sent Lewis and Clark across the country, and we had the Louisiana Purchase, and we started with the Wild Wild West, if you remember. Yeah. If you remember your civics class, they had to have a way when people started populating areas or counties or parishes or whatever to collect taxes and to maintain law and order, because people were just shooting people and stealing and doing what they wanted. No taxes were being paid. So when they started to incorporate areas, or people started to gather in areas and make towns, the federal government said, let's make a police jury system where a group of local people will get together, they will collect taxes, and they will fund the courthouse, and they will fund a sheriff. So that way we can have law and order in all of the new territories we're moving into. And that worked really good for a long time because, like I said, most of America was uninhabited, and we were trying to just establish law and order as we went across the country. Now, that's an old history of it. As we started building towns and cities, and we started having more than just a courthouse and a sheriff, and we started having sanitation and drainage and roads and all these other things that we have now we built into cities, they realized that the form of government needed to have a little more accountability. So we started having mayors and councils, which you would have that it's the same balance of government we have with the president and the Congress, with the governor and the House and the Senate in every state, and every town in America has a mayor and council because of those reasons. Now, most of the country has gone to the that bicameral system, which is, as I said, more balanced. It can reduce corruption because you have the legislative and executive branch making decisions together for what's best for the people. So once they started doing that, most of the country adopted that. Some places stayed with the police jury system for the last 212 years. Now, in 1974, Louisiana revised their constitution. And in that constitution, they had a provision, I think it's Article 6.5, that said that if any parish wanted to, they could adopt a home rule charter for their parish and establish this type of government. They gave two ways to do it. They said you can either have your governing authority, which was a police jury, appoint a commission to write a charter and then have the people vote on it. Or if they don't want to do that, then you have a petition with 10% of the voters signing. Once 10% of the voters are signed, then the police jury shall call for an election of commissioners to write the same charter. So they made it really simple. And when you have a law that says you shall do something to a governing body, that's what's called an administrative duty. They don't really have a choice. You have to do this. You have to pay your bills. You have to, you have to
Right.
follow the law. And so I guess they didn't envision that any parish would go against a law that said shall in the Constitution, because the 26 parishes that have done this in Louisiana to this point have all appointed a commission once the people asked them to appoint a commission.
They've never taken it to our extent.
No,
where they're
nobody.
blocking it in
What
petitions and
politician
everything.
would imagine going against the public asking for a document to be written for free? That's all we're asking, is that a document be written. We can look at it, we can decide if it's best for us and vote on it. So what politician would spend public money to fight against that? In 26 other parishes, they haven't. And then Avoyelles was the only one they decided to do it. I would have never thought it would have gotten this far. Last time we talked, I think we were just starting to get petition
Yeah.
signatures. I actually sat and spoke with Kirby for a couple of hours, Kirby Roy, who's the president of the police jury, before we started collecting signatures. And what I told him was a group of businessmen, politicians, regular people asked me to help with this. I've studied it, I've researched it, I've looked into it, and I think it may be something the parish would want to explore. Other parishes that have done this have really developed their economy. They've really developed their politics within the parish to be able to be more fair, to where everybody gets more of a say. And I think it's something we should explore. What I want y'all to do is to appoint a commission to write it. And he said, I don't think we're going to do that. So that's why we got the petition signed. And if you want to go on, I can explain what's happened so far if you're ready for that.
Right.
Does that explain how
Yeah.
what Home Rule Charter is, how it started, and how we got to where we are today?
Yeah, absolutely. How we got to well, almost to where we got today, because there's a lot of other things happened since where we are like right now.
Okay, well,
today.
I can go
Yeah.
over that then. We got our petition
Okay, go
signed.
ahead.
We got our petition signed. Over 3,000 people signed it. We sent it to the registrar of voters. This has never been done before, so the registrar of voters the whole time was consulting with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to make sure we weren't doing this in vain, to make sure, it's never been done, like I said. They wanted to make sure everything was right. And when we turned all these in, she and her staff actually knocked off almost 500 signatures that we had gotten. Some of them were because it was a convicted felon. Of course, a convicted felon can't vote or sign a petition. Some of them were people that weren't registered to vote. Some of them, their name was just messy and they couldn't read it. So when we realized that was happening, we were allowed, the petition getters were allowed to write the person's name, write their address, write their year of birth. They just had to sign it. So a lot of them on there, and we had people all over getting these signed. So you don't know, people would just come grab blanks and go get them signed. That's why we had so many that were knocked off. Some of them probably were illegitimate. Not probably, they were.
Yeah.
I had some guys come sign mine, and they left. I looked up their name on the voter list, and they weren't registered voters, so they just wanted to sign it. But so once we turned that into the registrar of voters, and according to the law, she gave it to the clerk of court and gave it to the clerk of the police jury. Then they, as the law says, they shall call for an election of commissioners. Now, the problem came when they did not call for an election of commissioners.
So right quick, let me ask you this. So about 500 got knocked off. Y'all still had enough signatures, the required 10% of registered voters?
Yeah. And I know Kirby has said, what about the other 90%? And I say, you're right. What about the other 90%? That's why the law requires 10%, so we can see what the other 90% want.
Right.
If you want us to get 100%, then we just have a vote for it. That's why you get the 10%. Right. So the problem came when they didn't fulfill that administrative duty and call for the election of commissioners. There was 5-4 voting on the police jury. They didn't. Their counsel told them you can't do that. It's administrative duty. You have to do it. The attorney general's opinion was that you have to do it. Obviously, it's written in the law like this. The confusion comes when they looked at the petition and found inadequacies with it themselves. Okay, and there is a law.
They, as in the police jury?
Yes, the members of the police.
The members of the police jury.
Yeah, they looked at it and said, well, this is insufficient. We don't like it. There are thousands and thousands of laws on the books, right? Those laws contradict each other all the time. There's one law that says this, and there's one law that says that. When you cherry pick your laws, do you know what helps us decide which one's right?
Whoever the judge, whoever the...
We look at case law, right? We look at case law to see which one of these goes. Because there's, like I said, there's laws, there's thousands of laws passed all the time, and they eventually always end up contradicting each other somewhere, and they go to court, and judges decide which one to follow. So these laws did contradict each other. The law that the police jury is talking about is an older law that says when you have a petition, you have to have this, including ward and precinct. Okay? So when we were getting the petition signed, I had a thumb drive that you can get from the Secretary of State, and it has every ward and precinct and every information about every voter. So we actually started looking up every voter and putting the ward and precinct. When we spoke to the registrar of voters about this, she said, at this time, we are redistricting. Most of those are going to be wrong. We're in the middle of redistricting. A lot of those are not going to be the same ward and precinct you're putting. That's number one. Number two, the Secretary of State said that's probably that we don't make people put that to register to vote, so we're obviously not going to make them put it on this. Even though it's on the form to register to vote, and the law says you have to put it register to vote, nobody knows theirs. And number three is that we even if we put in they'd been wrong, but number three is that she had checked with everybody, and she checked with everybody up the chain of command, and there was no problem with it.
Even without the wards and precinct, there wasn't
even without the wards and precinct. And number three is case law. When you look at case law, when we look at every instance where something's gone to court where the voter's rights is in question, almost every time without fail, judges and juries side on the side of the voter or the intent of the voter. So do you think that everybody who signed that intended not to have their wishes forward on the petition because they don't know their ward and precinct? I mean, there is case law stacked up as high as this building right here from the NAACP, the ACLU, and other organizations that have fought on the rights of voters to be able to do things like this.
But not for this particular...
No, this has never been done before. But when you look at the rights of voters and putting information on things like petitions and voter registration forms, there's really no question. And in the end, if this continues with going back and forth to court, I have no doubt. I mean, every attorney you talk to, except the one that's making a bunch of money off of our tax dollars for the police jury, says, yeah, they're going to lose. Obviously, they're going to have to write this charter.
Right. So it's my understanding it went to district court. So let's back up just for a minute. So it's not we the people that filed the lawsuit against the police jury. It was
it's Glenn Gudo. Glenn Gudo, because you have to be an individual.
Right.
Filed the lawsuit.
But he's representing the We the People organization.
You say that, yeah.
So either way, it's him. He filed the officially.
It's called a writ of mandamus, where you say you have to do this ministerial duty, and the judge in Avoyelles said yes, you have to do it.
Okay.
Okay, so after that happened, then the police jury, this is the one that Bobby Borland had voted for to appeal the case to the Third Circuit Appeals, which continues
Right.
paying their lawyer. So the police jury gave 5 reasons why they should win. Okay, they sent it to the Third Circuit. The Third Circuit found no merit on all 5 of those. They said like they paid people to get the signatures, which is not illegal, by the way. You can pay people to sit at a table and get a signature. They're not weren't paid by the signature,
Right.
and a bunch of other things, and everything they said. The Third Circuit said no, they can do that, they can do that, but Judge Bennett should have allowed the actual petition to be put into evidence when they did the trial. Now, we had the petition there. Glenn had the petition there to put into evidence. When the registrar of voters got on the stand, we had the petition to put it, and Judge Bennett said, "Hold up! Today, the police jury filed suit against their own registrar of voters, so I would caution her not to talk about this without counsel." So they didn't put it in there because of that.
So that's why, because that was the next question I was going to get to. Why wasn't the petitions present at the district court level? So it's not because y'all were trying to hide the discrepancies of the petition.
No, it was there. It was Judge Bennett realized that day, which I think they're still debating whether they can sue their own registrar of voters because they would have to pay for her lawyer because she was their employee.
What are they suing her for? For signing something that they feel was an illegitimate
Right.
document? And
I'm
signing off on
assuming,
it?
yeah, yeah.
So it goes to the Third Circuit. So the Third Circuit sides in favor of the police jury.
No, not at all. The Third Circuit finds all of their reasons. They denied all of their reasons, but they said this one of their reasons was not that the actual petition was in there, but they said we remand it back to district court and go ahead and allow this in there. Okay,
So
go and
the
allow the
talk about
petition
the
in there.
Louisiana State Supreme Court, it never got to that level.
So I think it was appealed to them, but what you have to understand about a Supreme Court is they get hundreds of cases a year, maybe even thousands, and they may never have even seen it. They have law clerks that look at them, and they'll decide if it's something that merits them looking at, and they just didn't look at it, which is not
Right.
uncommon. I mean, it's you
Yeah.
you might do 20 or 30 good cases and a good lawyer, and you may not get any of them heard by the Supreme
Right.
Court.
But that had come up on another podcast. It was a couple of people have said it. They I think maybe even Kirby and Dare. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but it was some incumbents, and they said that it did go. Maybe they may have misunderstood.
Yeah, it was never
or,
heard by the Supreme Court. It was sent
But
back down.
and Bobby said like it never made it to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So it went to the Third Circuit. The Third Circuit didn't make a ruling on it. So then nobody appealed anything. They didn't make a ruling. They sent it back to district court.
So actually, on October 3rd, we had a court date. I say we. Glenn Gudo had a court date on October 3rd. They went there. The police jury asked for a continuance. They continued it into January to be heard in January.
And that'd be heard by Judge Bennett
Yep.
or
Yep.
yeah. Okay, so what's going to be the difference between the first trial with Judge Bennett and the second one? Is it the petition only
I would
that's
say
going to
the
be
petition
heard?
would be in there, and they would probably be able to call witnesses and ask them about it if they signed it and whatnot. Yeah, I guess that's it. And of course, they were able to present that case law that I was talking about to show.
Right. All right. So Bobby, when Bobby was here, we interviewed. He brought all stacks of papers and stuff like that. After the pod, he had talked about discrepancies and everything. After the podcast, he showed me quite a few. But I mean, it's not uncommon. The wards and precincts, there, most of them, wasn't there. There was other things that he brought up, like I guess there's no way of proving, but in he's saying, look, all these signatures look the same. It was signed by the same person or something like that, or like some the witnesses. There was like some witnesses that was signed without someone being without it being filled out yet. Was that part of the 500 they threw out, or is there just more than that was overlooked by the Register of Voters?
I have no idea. I'm not an expert in. I don't claim to be an expert in petitions. I don't claim to be an expert in certifying petitions. But who is the Secretary of State's office, the Attorney General's office, and the Registrar of Voters, and they certified the petition. And if you
Right.
know anything about Registrar of Voters, anonymity is very big with them. The ability to not pick sides is very big with them, and that's what they live and breathe. So every little thing they do, they try not to make a mistake and not to show in favor of anybody. And our registrar of voters was adamant the whole time, and that's why she knocked off 500
Yeah.
of those signatures to go beyond probably to make sure
And y'all
that.
still had the 10%
Yeah.
that you
And we could
needed.
get them again. It was actually when we got that 10%, it was the end of February. It was just starting to warm up.
Yeah.
People
So
were just start. There was people coming to get blank petitions and signing them everywhere. I kind
right,
of called everybody and said, "Stop. We have enough. We're done."
right. So let's say after this election, or let's say I guess it would all depend on how the court turn out in January. Because I would ask, will there be another effort of new petitions with all of the wards and precincts and whatever, or I guess it would all depend on how the judge ruled. This is
What
dead in
also
its tracks, or
that could happen. What also could happen is if a couple of these police jurors that have been voting against it lose their elections, then the case could be settled. They could appoint a commission, or
right
we
immediately
could elect a
they could
commission,
end it
or
and everything else.
I mean, if we could appoint one, you save the money of having an
Right, we
election.
already had $35,000, and well, that was last month. I
Yeah,
mean, it's only gonna climb,
yeah,
and like Kirby had said, during not a special election, during a general election, it still costs the parish $20,000. Well, people would say that, well, the $35,000 we spent on the lawyer is
yeah,
almost two elections worth.
yeah.
So one would be you electing your commissioners, one the next election
And
voting
and,
on the
and,
charter,
and when they talk
and
about
it's
that
going to be
stuff,
more too.
when they talk about that stuff, yes, it matters. Yes, that money matters. But I think when they talk about that, they're playing checkers and we're playing chess. We're thinking about 20 years from now, 40 years from now, the economy of the parish for our kids and grandkids. We're not thinking about money next year. It's going to be worth it if it works out. And I've been quoted as saying that you never built anything without taking a calculated risk. Nobody ever built a business. Nobody ever built a family. Nobody ever did anything without taking that calculated risk. And this is a calculated risk. We could elect somebody bad to be parish president, and he could throw the parish into turmoil. But the way we are now, we're not moving anywhere, and I think most people agree with that.
So we'll go back to Bobby and the elections and everything else. Like I said, Bobby brought up a lot of points that I think we need to address. He says that since y'all can't get the petition passed and everything, the like he didn't say it exactly like this, but in a nutshell, there's a grand conspiracy to get out all of the old incumbents, and there's lots of money going towards the new candidates that are running.
And
Any validity or
that could not be further from the truth. The people that the incumbents that we have now, by the time home rule charter, if it's accepted by the people and implemented, starts to make a difference, those names will be forgotten. That's just people that are in an office right now. We have nothing against any of those people. They wake up every morning, they put their pants on just like you and I do, and they are public servants, all of them. I have no doubt that they are trying to help the public, they're trying to help us. The system is where we are being failed, not the individual. So Bobby Borlaug, I'm a friend. Kirby Roy, I'm a friend. All these guys I'm friends with, and I really think their intentions are really good. It's just some people in the parish think that we should go a different route to try to give ourselves all the advantages we can get for our future and for the future of our children.
like Kirby had said on my podcast, he said he said, look, we all have different opinions. He said, my opinion is it should just, kind of
Yeah.
stay like this. Some people have opinions that we should go towards the home rule
And I
charter.
agree, and I think we should vote on it.
Yeah,
When the opinion was we should pass a trash tax or we should pass a road tax, they didn't mind put it on the ballot. But something like this, I'm not sure why we can't put it on the ballot
yeah,
to let the people look at it.
that's a fair point. So another accusation Bobby said is, and I think this is a big one, has the charter already been written? Is it something that y'all are trying to pass through?
Not at all. I've done some research on it. If we do end up writing it, I'm interested in the process of it. We actually have spoken to some people who we would like to run to be on the commission that writes it. One of them is he's a preacher in Mansura. He's a good friend. I wanted somebody who doesn't know anything about it, but that is intelligent enough to look at the facts and decide. We have several females on it. We have a business man who runs a $200 million a year business who I've talked to about being on this to help write this charter. So we want to get the best and brightest of Avoyelles, and we want to get people from other parishes who have done this to come in and tell us what they did wrong and what they did right to help us write it. So when we get it written, hopefully it'll be the best thing we can have written.
You can kind of learn from someone else's mistakes
Certainly,
and get
certainly.
the launch pad.
Yeah.
So speaking of these people, would they need to be elected? Say things go your way, uh, petition's good, court goes. So what's the next step? These individuals you named,
So
are
if
they
if if
appointed or they're
if the
elected?
case isn't settled before then, then we have an agreement with the police jury as to what we're going to do, then yeah, they would be elected. They have to put their name on the ballot and run to write this commission.
So none of these are just going to be, here you go, these are the commissioners.
No,
They will be voted
unless
on.
unless the police jury and Glenn Gudo come to an agreement on to who's going to be on the commission.
Then the police jury theoretically could say, okay, the police jury could appoint the commissioners.
That would have to be in a settlement of the case because we've already turned in, or a certified petition is already turned in. So at this point, they don't have the choice of appointing.
You got
Before
to go
that
through the
point, they
process
could
now.
have appointed commissioners at any time along that.
Right.
to
Not
write.
elected, they would be
Right.
appointed.
But now they say they have to be elected, or because the case has been filed, we could settle the case and say these are the commissioners to write it. And look, if it comes to that, I want people who are not necessarily against it, but that aren't for it, to hear the arguments for and against and make those decisions. Because this needs to be a gathering of people from across the parish, from different demographics and different lifestyles, and because that's what we have in this parish. And I'd like to see a charter written with all of those people in mind.
So if you could tell me, if you could list a few things why you think home rule charter would be good for the parish, how would it benefit us as opposed to our current situation?
So as I've said, it creates that balance of power. It also creates.
Well, some might argue there's a balance of power because you already have now there's not one man in charge. Well, there's a president, but not elected by all of the people. But there are, the 8 districts, people elected that way.
And those guys, they show up to those meetings a couple times a month, and some of them do some work on their days off, but they're not paid to make those decisions full time, nor are they necessarily qualified to run, a $40 million business or $20 million business, whatever it is that their budget is. So it does create that balance of power. So let me just give you an example of how that balance of power could work. Let me not say will work because we haven't written it
Right.
yet. We don't know what it is. I'll just give an example of what could happen. Let's say there's some money being put for proposed drainage going through 2 different districts, okay? Maybe one's a minority district, maybe one's not. Maybe, it's going to help everybody in these 2 districts. And you have your 9-person council and your president. And they're deciding how to spend this money. And a couple of these jurors they don't care about it. They don't want to spend the money because it's not in their district. And some of them do because it's in their district. And some of them think, well, we don't need to put that there. It's going through a town, but it may affect the people on the other side of the town. And let's say it's unfair, or some people think it's unfair. Let's say this council votes 5-4 against it, okay, or 5-4 for it. Either way, the president can look at that theoretically because it hasn't been written. I don't have times to say that, but theoretically he could look at it, or she could look at it and say, no, that's not fair for this district and this district because they're spending all the money. This, he could veto it. Well, if he vetoes it, it would go back to this council, and they would have to have, if it's written like that, a 2/3 vote to override this veto. So there's more discussion about when we're spending money. There's more, and if this guy screws up and passes it, and these didn't want to, or vice versa, there's more accountability, not just one person. So when you have our small districts, we have 9 small districts in this parish, and they have probably 1,200 active voters. About 50% of our voters vote, right? So if you're in there 20 years, all you need is 600 votes to win forever, into perpetuity. In those 20 years, if you start doing drainage for large families or for communities or for certain people, and you've talked to them, and they're going to vote for you every time, and you know it, there's never going to be a change of the guard. You're always going to have the same people in there, even if they're doing other things that maybe aren't right for the rest of the voters or the rest of the people. They don't even vote in those areas. The balance of power. Also, home rule charter can separate us from state rule. We create some more autonomy within the parish. We can make our own laws easier. Right now, we have to go to the state every time we want to make a law. Our state rep has to go make it. You can make your own parish laws a little easier.
Does that include like the allocation of taxes, like the 1/4%, whatever they wanted to raise?
Right.
That could
And
be
look,
handled at a
it could
parish
be
level.
written in a charter that the people have to vote on any tax raise. You could do
Right.
that. I mean, you can write it any way you want. we could write in our charter that we want to make a law that says you're not allowed to put tomatoes in gumbo in Avoyelles Parish. If we want to do that, we can do it, and
That'd
anybody can
probably
be
pass.
arrested for putting tomatoes in their gumbo.
That'd pass.
So it increases the accountability of those officials. And let me give you an example of how this increases accountability. And I know you've probably seen this in the paper. Last year, the last 2 years, there was ARPA money, which is
What is it?
ARPA money. It's American Rescue Plan something. It's COVID money is what it is. And they allowed some of that money to be paid to the employees of local governments. Okay. Um, it was kind of ambiguous as to exactly how that money could be spent, but it was supposed to be for essential employees getting $13 an hour over their normal pay because of the dangers they were taking going out in the public and working during COVID, right? That makes sense, right? If you having to deal with the public and you're a policeman or you're working at a hospital or whatever, that made sense to do that. Well, there was a lack of an accountability when we got that money because there was one vote in a police jury meeting a couple of years ago that said to allow bonus pay to be given to employees, and that was it.
So that wasn't meant for bonus play. Well, I guess you saying it just wasn't, I guess, worded.
It was just very
wasn't
plainly worded.
Yeah,
There was no accountability on the wording of the vote.
right. It was a very broadly
So
written.
what happened was is that I guess the people that work at the police jury said, well, we've got all this money, let's pay ourselves. Now, every time you look up ways to spend ARPA funds, frequently asked questions on ARPA funds, rules on how to spend it. Division administration also for the state also says this. It was maxed out at $25,000 per employee for the duration of the pandemic. We ended up spending in this parish $467,000 on overtime or bonus pay to employees that work for this parish. And I think it was in the paper, it's been in the paper the last couple of weeks. Only about 15 of those employees got that. Two of them got almost $60,000, which matches their pay for the year or more than their pay for the year.
Wow.
You talk about no accountability. So if you have a parish president in there and that happens, that guy's gone. Who's going to vote? He just wasted $500,000 because he didn't see where the money was going.
All right, but the rules were they couldn't have more than
Right.
25,000 to
Per
begin
employee.
with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And those rules are pretty plain. So, and that's just one example of how you increase that accountability. Um, you can tailor a charter for our area that allows changes in rules much easier. So, and that has to do with zoning, which some people think is good and some people think it's bad. You may think more regulation is bad. Sometimes zoning you can create economic zones where you can give lower taxes to companies coming in. We can't do that right now. The state has to do it. But if you have a charter, that's just one example of one of the things you can put in it. So that's just a few of your advantages to having a charter.
I think one of the biggest questions that people have, what I hear, is where will the money come from to pay a parish president? Because they're going to make more than what the police jury members are making now, the $850 a month or whatever. It'll be a full-time job. You're going to have to pay them something. Where does that money come from?
So the last two parishes to do this are St. Landry and Point Capee, and they're our neighbors of both sides. When the St. Landry parish president came and spoke at a forum we had, and he said that on day one, when he walked into that office, he was able to save the parish enough money by having the correct amount of oversight to pay his salary for the year. And I would I would say it would be very easy for a competent parish president to come in, start looking at the books, and start looking at the numbers, and start looking at expenditures as a full-time job, and either save that money by stopping to waste it or going to Baton Rouge and lobbying for money for an entire parish. Right now, if one of our police jurors goes to Baton Rouge and says, we want some money for this, they represent maybe 600 voters because that's how many people might have voted for if they got just over 50%.
Right.
If a parish president goes to Baton Rouge and says that we need money for this, he represents 42,000 people in the parish. I went to a Louisiana Business Administration conference a few months ago, and there was thousands of people. It was in a big giant room. There was thousands of people there. And before it started, they introduced all the state reps that were there, and they introduced all the senators that were there, and then they introduced about 6 parish presidents that were there. So those people in those positions have that kind of clout when it comes to Baton Rouge for getting money for a parish, and they can lobby for that money.
Right. It makes sense. Like you said, the clout, you're representing the entire parish. You were voted for voted on by the entire parish as well.
Yeah, we don't have we're a poor parish, and we do have a money problem, but we also have an accountability problem and a where's the money going and where is it being spent problem.
Yeah, money's always been an issue in this parish. Like you said, a big problem. I don't think everybody that gets into office turns into, I don't think they're evil people and
Sure.
whatever. I do know there are struggles with the funding, and especially interviewing a lot of the candidates and everything. And we just have a small parish, like you said, 40. I actually think it's 40,000 now on the 2020 census. It was 42 in 2010. But Rapides Parish, I think it's somewhere around 150,000. So I mean, their roads are better. You have more money, more revenue generated. That's a job I wouldn't want. In
No.
fact, no public office after interviewing lots of people.
Yeah, right.
So
Well,
it's a tough one.
coincidentally, in St. Landry Parish, they're doing like we are now. They would never be able to pass a road tax, never be able to get money to put their new roads. The confidence in their local government went up after they switched to a home rule charter and they had a president there who was more accountable. Now they were able to pass a village tax, and every 15 years, every parish road gets resurfaced, which they weren't able to do that
Yeah,
before.
that's positive progress.
Right.
Well, Jay, we leaving anything out? Is there anything else you want to add?
Um,
I know we had a lot of
Yes,
things.
I want to talk about
Mhm.
the claim that home rule charter is bad for our minority community, because that's
Yeah,
been a
that's
big
a good
thing.
one.
And before I when I was I mentioned before I did a lot of research on this before I decided to help out with it, and I looked into that. That's what I do. I research. I wondered why people were saying that, and I called the NAACP president in Point Capee, which is the most recent parish to pass it. Her name is Dr. Monica Farb, and I told her what I was doing, and I asked, "Is it bad for the minority community, and how?" Because I just couldn't understand how it would be. And I'll explain why in a minute. But she said, no, it's not bad for the minority community. We rarely had a say in our local government before this, and now our 20 whatever percent of minorities in Point Capee, our voice is big because that parish president or that guy running for parish president has to have our support. If he doesn't have our support, he's going to lose to the other guy. So typically, who's going to win for parish president in a parish with a 20 to 35% minority population is going to have the support of that minority population.
All right.
They have to. They're
They
not going to be
won't be
able
able
to
to
win
win
with that.
without
If
it.
there's three or four people run, the one who has the support of the minority population is
Right.
going to win. And so she said, and while I was talking, she said, no, but we would do some things different. We would have more oversight on committees. The parish president wouldn't be able to just appoint people to committees, which I don't know if they can or not over there, but that's just some advice she was giving about
Right.
some stuff they would change. But she said no, and we went on to talk and discussed how the position of sheriff is not a racist position. Everybody in the parish votes on it. The position of clerk of court, of judge, of DA, any of those, the whole
Right.
parish gets to vote on a position. Just because the whole parish gets to vote on it does not mean they're not representing that minority
Everyone.
population. Because that whoever our parish president is will have to have the ear of the minority population if they want to stay in office.
That's right. You
That's
won't be able to
it's a
just
simple
wash over
fact.
the certain
It's a simple
areas.
fact.
You're gonna have to tend
And they'll
to.
be able to vote. Minorities will have a say. Like if you're a minority right now and you live in a 70% white district or a 60%, you might think your vote doesn't count. Your vote's going to count for that parish president because they're going to have the ear of your community.
Right.
Period.
What else? You have it. So you got your
Yeah.
booklet pulled up there.
I just, if you want to talk about which jurors are
Oh,
against it and why, but I think we
yeah,
covered
yeah.
all that really.
We
Uh,
well, no, I don't think yeah, I had it right here. We were supposed to
so Bobby was for it. Bobby Barlow was for it until it went to until the petition came in and it went to the phase where they were deciding whether or not they were going to appeal it or not. And he went on the advice of their attorney, who said that the petition is botched. He said it was no good. When you have a grassroots effort, you have normal people who are going out and doing. That's why the oversight happens at the registrar of voters and secretary of state level. And like I said, we did screw up. About 500 of them weren't good. The rest of them were.
right.
And even if that is the case, it's gonna go. It's gonna win. Any attorney, if you talk to any attorney, they're gonna look at the case law and they're gonna tell you. So look, he has his opinion on it. You can always look at one law and have cognitive dissonance toward that law, meaning that that's the way you thought at first, so that's the way it's going to support your
Yeah.
view of something. It's like when you tell somebody to quit smoking. Oh, I had an uncle that lived to be 100 years, 100 years old.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
not going to quit smoking. He
And
lived
ate bacon every
well.
day.
Look at all the other people. Yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily. That's the
Yeah.
exception. So this law is the exception to what case law tells us. Um, and the other jurors that are against it that give the minority argument, and I can't find merit in it. I would like to hear the exact argument from them as to why, because I think my argument is pretty strong for why it does have an advantage to the minority community. Why any parish-wide elected official has an advantage. You know, in the town of Mansura, it's like 70 something percent minority. Is that unfair that they're pretty much going to elect a minority mayor? No, that's the minority of the people that live there. I mean, the majority of the people that live there are voting for that. If that's the way they feel, that's the way they feel. A white mayor could get elected in Mansur if the right guy comes along, and
Yeah.
I think somebody of color could be elected to any parish office if the right one comes along with the right qualification. So I don't buy into that.
Yeah.
But I think we kind of covered everything
All
I
right.
had
Well,
written down.
we blazed through my question, and you had a few more, so I said, well, I'll just let you take it and see what it is. So so the jurors that were against, you want to mention them by name or?
It does. Kirby's against it. Kirby Roy.
So on the original, it was originally a 5-4
Right.
vote.
Right.
So who were the five?
Kirby Roy, McKinley Keller, Pop. I'm sorry, McKinley.
Pop McKinley Keller and I know Glenn
Glenn
McKinley.
McKinley. And
I
John
get them
Earls.
confused
And
too.
John Earls were always against it. And
Right.
there's one that's not running. He didn't have any opposition.
Yeah, that's my district, District 5.
Uh,
Dan. I can't think of his name. It'll come to me in a
he was
minute.
just appointed recently, so I don't
Right.
know a
Yeah,
whole
he
lot
took
about
Colonel Jones's place.
it. Right. But nobody ran
Emily,
against
can
him.
you pull that up? Who's District 5?
And then the ones that continually voted for it was Ward 1, Wiley. And then Jacob Coco continually voted for it, and one more. The one who keeps bringing up the vote is man, it escapes me. He's a plumber from Marksville. That might help you.
Oh, Mark Borel.
More Burrell.
Yeah.
Those three consistently voted for it, and Bobby had voted for it until it was time to appeal it, and then he voted against it. So and all those people, with the exception to the one we discussed in Marksville, all of them have opposition that are not necessarily for home rule charter, but they are for exploring the option of it.
Right.
And it hasn't been written. I mean, there's despite what people think, I have no idea what's going to be in it. It could when you talk to these other parishes that have written charters, it kind of takes a life of its own depending on who the members of the commission are. In fact, there's one story, and I don't recall what parish it is. They were the police jury was against it, and they said, "Well, if y'all want us to appoint a commission, we'll appoint a commission, just to appease you." Well, the commission they appointed people who were against it on the commission. By the time they were done writing it, they had a really good document, and they were all for it. The whole commission was for what they had
Right.
written, and it ended up getting voted for, and they had a home rule charter in that parish.
Yeah. And to back up on Bobby, uh, to be fair, what he had said on the podcast, he said he had voted for it originally.
Mm-hmm.
Then it then he voted for the petition. Once the petition was signed by the register of voters, he signed. He was for it to not seek outside counsel. He said he was against the outside counsel. Then somewhere after that is whenever he flipped. He said, from what I understood him to say, I guess it's their lawyer that found. I guess she went through the petition. Then when he seen the 500 discrepancies, whatever, then that's when he came on board. He describes it like, if I'm representing these people and representing these people, I was for it, but now I got to represent these people against it.
Right.
If you're trying to change a law of government, a way of governing, that you'd have to cross the T's, dot your I's.
And he voted against the appeal, right?
Yeah.
And the important thing to remember is when you have a petition, let's say this was a petition, you know how they have recall petitions all the time?
Mm-hmm.
If you would have a recall petition and then allow the person you're trying to recall or take their power away to make the decision whether that petition is good, what are they going to say every time? Well, no, I don't like that petition. There's something wrong with it. A home rule charter has the ability to take away some power from the police jury. It has the ability to take away some of their pay. So the Constitution is very clear on the administrative duty of you shall appoint a commission. It didn't say you should look at it and decide whether whether you should be allowed for the people to take your power away. The people decide whether they want to take some of your power away or not. So it's preposterous to think that the intent of the Louisiana Constitution was to allow police jurors to decide themselves if a petition was good that may take their power away.
So what if if let's say police jury members were worried that they would be out of a job if home rule charter went that way, could they run? And I mean, you're still going to have districts, even in a home rule charter. They may be divided different, however that is.
You would
But
have your
you could
same 9
still
districts.
run. Yeah, you could still run in your district to represent that district, right?
Certainly. In fact, I wouldn't.
That would be different than the commissioners that would be appointed or elected to write the charter.
Right.
That wouldn't be the same thing as the person representing your district. You're still gonna have someone per district running and campaigning.
So what's interesting is, and this is in the law too, the people that write the charter, that commission that's either appointed or elected, cannot run for those positions they create.
That's fair.
It is fair because you don't want to make up your own position
Yeah.
and then go run
Yeah,
for
who
it.
wouldn't want to do that?
Right.
I mean,
Now you can run for it later on if you want. You just can't initially run for it. But no, those people, whoever, who let's say just the charter is written and it's voted on, and the people vote to accept the home rule charter in the Avoyelles. It's going to have those 9 districts, which are 3 minority districts. That's federally mandated. That's going to happen, and chances are it will add a parish president. It doesn't have to. Chances are we'll add that position. The next election we'll have an election for 9 parish council members and 1 parish president for the entire parish. Those 9 parish council members, those guys can still run for their same jobs, which they would anyway.
yeah,
if they were
we
running
can
for
still
police
have
jury
the
again,
same police
they
jury
will still
members.
be
They
in the
would be
same.
called something
They will
else.
still
most
have the
probably.
same vote, and those 9 member commit. No, I'm sorry, that 9 member council can elect their own president to be the president of the council, to be the tiebreaker for them, just like they are now.
Right.
They can elect their own. They can switch it from one person to the other every year to have a president of that council, and that council holds a lot of power. It just, you have that balance of power with the parish president representing the entire parish.
Same as Congress and
Exactly.
your 2 branches of
Same as
legislation and
every
the
town you
president
go
for
in the entire
judicial.
world.
So let's say you mentioned 500 signatures were thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
How many more do you have to spare for that 10%? If
There was a
do
few
have
hundred.
more?
I don't recall how many.
So
There
it
was
pretty close.
It was yeah. Well, it was close because we stopped getting signatures. When the law
Right.
says you have to get 10% and they're certified, you get your 10%. We
Yeah,
could
you don't try to see how many
we
you
could have
get.
gone and
You
got
just-
more. It's a lot of work to sit there and get signatures, and to explain. We sat there. We had probably 50 volunteers that were helping from all across the parish, helping us get signatures, and they would have to explain to everybody what it is, and I would have to explain to them, or we would have to explain to them what it was, and it's a good bit of work because it's a big transition, it's a big change, and people are skeptical of change, and they're nervous about change, and so
Yeah.
they want to know all they can about it, which is. It's why it's great you have this podcast to be able to
Yeah, you should have the
explain that to
podcast playing on a loop, like at a funeral home or something with the pictures.
try, man. People don't have an attention span.
Right.
People don't have much of an attention span anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else you want to add?
Man, I hope I've covered it all.
Yeah, because I wrote down about 10 questions of that we really needed to hit. I knew you had a few things, but I know after as
I'd
soon
like
as
to
we
say
walk
one.
out,
I'd like to say one more thing that I've read online a couple of things that I want to clarify about myself before we finish. Having an education does not make me any more intelligent than anybody else in this parish. People get upset when you tell them you have a PhD, and they get mad about it because they think, well, you're telling me you're smarter. And I know garbage men that have more intelligence than some people that have PhDs, right? So your intelligence level has nothing to do with your education. What that education does is that puts you in front of a set of facts. It puts you in front of a history of circumstances. It puts you in front of the ability to research and solve problems in an educated way that other people may not have had the opportunity to do. So again, an education does not make you any smarter than anybody else, doesn't make me any better than anybody else, but it does it gives me those tools to solve those kinds of problems. And another thing is, people have said that I'm doing this because I want to run for parish president. I can tell you right now on this podcast, I have no plans to run for parish president. There's much easier ways to make money in my mind.
me either. I'm not running either.
And Glenn Gudo's son has no plans to run for parish president. There's much easier ways to make money in his mind than that too.
Right.
And Glenn Gudo is 84 years old. He will not run for parish president either. So I'd like to clear that up before we
Right,
go
clear
off
the air
here.
there.
Yeah.
All right, Jay. Well, if that's it, we can wrap it up.
man.
appreciate you coming on. You know, we here on the Other Side podcast, we like giving both sides, everybody's side, and it kind of got it heated with a little, after Bobby's, and I had a lot of questions, so I thought we'd get you in, clarify, give you a side, and whatever.
And I appreciate
If
you.
he
Man.
wants
Keep
to
up the
come
good
back
work.
on later, the election's here. We have no more time for podcasts,
Right.
but I'll be happy to interview anybody, whoever wants to come on. We can talk about issues. I want to thank everybody for watching, and don't forget, it's very important that you share these videos, but don't only share it through Facebook. You can, from YouTube, you can share the link from there, and also you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you won't miss an episode. You can get great content just like this, and it helps get us more on the forefront. It gets us more. It puts the word out there. Makes us more visible online. If you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, we're also available on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, wherever, Amazon. I'm probably leaving some out, but it's everywhere as you watch a podcast, we're there. So thanks, everyone. This is another edition of The Other Side.
I wanna be